Thank you to our witnesses for joining us today in the Financial Institutions and Monetary Policy Subcommittee to discuss the administrative process fouls and structural issues that make the CFPB ripe for reform. Today's hearing will examine the agency's leadership structure, current funding mechanism, and how the agency manages its budget, operations that are in need of reform, and current tactics of regulation without rules. Leadership structure. The CFPB does not have an executive board, an independent inspector general, or any true oversight of the director. This is unlike virtually every other federal agency. The agency is led by a single partisan director, Mr. Rohit Chopra, who has routinely acted unilaterally and arbitrarily, often outside any statutory mandate, without engaging in rulemaking in compliance with the Administrative Procedures Act, and even sometimes without adjudication. This has led to the CFPB becoming the most unchecked, unaccountable agency in the entire federal government. Funding mechanism and budget. Further, the CFPB operates outside of the congressional appropriations process, receiving its funding through the Federal Reserve through an opaque and arbitrary formula, operating obviously outside of the traditional appropriations process. This denies Congress the use of its most powerful oversight tool, the power of the purse. My legislation, the Taking Account of Bureaucrats Spending Act, or the TABS Act, would give Congress the power of the purse and its oversight power, reining in the unaccountable CFPB and subjecting the agency to the traditional appropriations process. As many of you all know, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit recently held that the funding mechanism is unconstitutional, stating that it is, quote, double insulated, as the Fed and CFPB both operate outside of the congressional appropriations process. The Supreme Court will review the Fifth Circuit's decision this fall and has the opportunity to clarify the constitutionality of the CFPB's funding once and for all. The TABS Act provides a common-sense solution for questions surrounding the funding mechanism and will put an end to bureaucratic overreach, and we hope will earn bipartisan support once it becomes clear that this legislation is the way to save the agency. Additionally, the Fed does not exercise authority over the CFPB in terms of its budget. Instead, the director is required to merely submit a short letter requesting funds each quarter that the director alone decides are reasonably necessary for operations. The Fed rubber stamps the request each time. This unchecked budget process allows for no accountability over the agency, which in turn permits the agency to stray from its core mission. This process must be reformed. Regulation without rules. Under Director Chopra, the CFPB has begun regulating without rules by evading the traditional notice and comment process. Instead, rulemaking through enforcement, blog posts, and press releases, changes to examination manuals. Not only does this circumvent the requirements of the APA, which provides for public input and prevents whiplash for industry with each change in leadership, but it also does not promote lasting policy directives and is harmful to consumers' access to financial services. Recently, the CFPB has failed to fulfill its statutory obligation to comply with the Small Business Regulatory Enforcement Fairness Act, SBREFA, which is required when a rule may have significant economic impact on small entities. Evading this statutory obligation is not only unacceptable from a process standpoint, but also disadvantages small institutions who serve consumers the CFPB is charged with protecting. In addition to the TABS Act today, we will examine other bills that reform the CFPB's leadership structure by establishing an independent IG and creating a multi-member bipartisan commission. Focus on the requirements for funding the agency's budget, require more oversight and quantitative analysis of the rulemaking process, and protect small businesses and whistleblowers. These bills are the first steps toward reforming the unaccountable CFPB. I look forward to discussing these issues and hearing from our panel today on what reforms will be beneficial for the agency and for consumers.